Hi. This is the battleship USS California settling into the mud at the bottom of Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Now, the Navy had two problems, but one big problem they had to solve was, what do you do with 1,000 sailors that suddenly don't have a job? Well, there was one group on the island that knew exactly who they wanted from that crew. That were the Navy code breakers at Station Hypo, and they said, hey, send us the band. And these musicians became part of the team that broke the Japanese Naval Code, which led to victory at the Battle of Midway and became a major turning point in the Pacific War. Now, to the Navy, it was no surprise that musicians would be good at fire control because they had known for years, right, that musicians were really, really good at this. So let's talk about what fire control was back then. You're on a speck in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You're heaving, you're wallowing, you're pitching, you're yawing, all very unpredictably. And you're going to take a 2,500-pound projectile, about that tall, and you're going to throw it about 20 miles, and you're going to hit another speck in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? You did not have any computers. You didn't have any radar. You didn't have any GPS. What you had was math. And musicians were really, really good at this task. The Navy understood and had for a long time the concept of STEAM: science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. Another ocean. This is the German battleship Bismarck. The Bismarck had just had a scrap with the HMS Hood. The Hood was the most feared ship in the British Navy. It sunk in minutes. There were over 1,500 sailors on the Hood. 3 survived. The British hated this ship. They were desperate to sink it. Fortunately, they had some musicians of their own. This is Jane Fawcett, mathematician, bilingual, codebreaker, and here we are again, musician. Well, Jane was doing traffic analysis one day, and she saw a message that looked really, really interesting, so she decided, I'm going to decode this thing and see what it says. Turns out it was from the Bismarck to a worried relative on land saying, hey, don't worry, everybody's fine. We're taking the Bismarck back to Brest in France. Bye-bye, Bismarck. Let's look at some other examples. Art Garfunkel, math teacher. Brian May of Queen, PhD in astrophysics. And Hedy Lamarr, of course, you've heard of Hedy Lamarr. No formal training really in anything except for a little acting. And she liked to dabble, and while she was dabbling, she invented frequency hopping radar jamming. You know, I remember back in the 90s, there was this time when they were talking about how, young music students turn out to be really good at math. So everybody went out and they bought Mozart tapes to play to their baby. What this accomplished was annoying a whole lot of babies. Because as it turns out, listening to music and actually performing and practicing music are two very, very different things. But let's switch to another art form. So this is Maria Sibylla Merian. David Attenborough called her one of the most significant contributors to the field of entomology ever. So what was the big deal? I mean, this is the 1800s, right? You could swing a dead cat, you'd hit an entomologist. Well, here's what was different. Back then, you just couldn't pick out your iPhone and say, oh, well, there's an interesting bug. I think I'll tweet that and I'll be famous. No, you had to be able to depict what you saw. And she, as you can see here, was an amazing artist. Her books sold thousands. This is how important she was in Germany. In 1991, and for years before that, she appeared on the 500 Deutsche Mark bill. Pretty impressive, if you ask me. I'd like to do that. If you're in this room and you don't know who this is, you should probably get out, right? Computer visionary, harpist, guitarist, also a mystic, probably a little bit weird, we don't know for sure. Oops. Ben Franklin, of course, scientist, author, philosopher, inventor, musician. Of course, Ben Franklin being Ben Franklin, he invented his own instrument called the glass harmonica, which he actually played. There are many copies made, and there are a lot still in existence around the world. This is Mae Jemison, right? Started Stanford at 16, became a chemical engineer, decided to become a family physician. decided to become an astronaut, also had a background in dancing and was an actress. And I love this picture. This is her doing a role on Star Trek: The Next Generation, art imitating life. So why can I talk about this personally? What's my tie-in? Well, for reasons that we don't really need to go into, I spent about 7 years of my life at military school. It was a beautiful spot, middle of the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, just absolutely gorgeous, also in the middle of nowhere. So now you've got 300 teenage boys in the middle of nowhere. All we wanted to do was meet girls. Well, a few of us figured out that if you were in plays, you could hang out with girls almost every day. So guess what? I was going to be in plays. So this went on for a while. Then my faculty advisor, a Colonel Savage, came up to me and he said, "Mr. Keller, you don't need to be going into the military. You don't need to be doing anything like that. I want you to go to university, and I want you to get a degree in the liberal arts." And I looked at Doc Savage, and I said, "Yes, sir." And so that's what I did. Things went fine until the last semester of my senior year. My roommate and I, who was also a theater major, needed one more science elective, which we dreaded. The class that we picked had to have only one criteria, and that was it could not meet before noon, because there's no way that we were getting out of bed before noon. Sorry, it just wasn't going to happen. Right, so I went and took the course. Everything was fine. Time to graduate. I mean, I am literally days away from getting my diploma. The professor, Dr. Ann Goodman, comes up to me and she says, "Keller, forget all this theater nonsense. You're really good at this stuff. I want you to go over to Ball State University. You're going to talk to the department chairman, and you're going to get your master's degree in computer science." And I looked at Dr. Goodman and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And so that's what I did. And that's how I wound up here. And yes, smart Alex, this is what it looked like. Although it might have been red and white, right? There were two flavors. Here's the interesting thing. First day on the job, it was with Duke Energy, used to be Public Service Indiana. That'll date me. But my new boss said to me, "Hey, you know what? We like your computer science degree. Ball State has a good program, did well on the computing test." He said, "But you know what we really love? We really love that theater background. So you could say that my computer science degree got me in the door, but what got me the job was the degree in theater." But here's what's interesting. All of a sudden in this country, we're really spending less and less time, money, and attention on the arts, especially in poor communities, right? For some reason, we are narrowing our concept of what education is. And why is that? Lately, probably about 4 years ago, I heard the CIO of the largest defense contractor of the world speaking. It was at Gartner down in Orlando. This guy has 5,000 IT in his organization. And he talked about his hiring practice. And he said, for every position I post, I get a stack of resumes about that high. We have to go through those, and we pick out the ones that are technically qualified, and then we wind up with a stack, I don't know, maybe about that high. That's still too many. And then the next thing we do is we go through and we pick out those who also have a background in the humanities, and those are the ones we're going to talk to. So why is there this disconnect in our society? I don't know, you've probably all seen something like this. Pretty picture, right? Creative, right brain, right? Logical, left brain. There's only one problem with this. It's bullshit. There is no science behind this at all. This is not the way the brain works. Why does it matter? It matters because of messaging. When my daughter was in second grade, they took her off to be tested because they thought she was gifted. They come back, "Oh, Mr. Keller, your daughter's really good at reading, writing, all that stuff. Math, not so much." She's 8 years old, and they're already putting her into a box. Come on. Interesting thing, we switched states, switched school districts. Very next year, months later, we're in Virginia. We told them this story, and they looked at us and said, "That is the stupidest thing we have ever heard in our lives." Which begs the question, do we even know what we're talking about when we talk about how the mind works in children? There's a group called PISA, and they did this survey of U.S. school children. And they asked the kids, they said, what does it take to be good at math? And the US kids all said, huge majority, well, you gotta have talent. You're born with that talent for math. That's what makes you good at math. Then they turned around and they asked Chinese kids the same question. What does it take to be good at math? And the Chinese kids said, well, duh, you gotta study hard, right? Math is hard. So I wonder why this map looks like this. Maybe it's because in China, there aren't a bunch of adults running around telling kids they can't do math. Come on, right? Let's stop using junk science. Let's stop telling kids what they can't do before they even know themselves. And let's level up. Math is hard. It's okay. Some things are harder than others. And let's make sure they do art. I worked with young ballet dancers for a long time, and I can tell you the teamwork, the self-discipline, the attention to detail, and just the flat-out pain that goes into looking like this is beyond belief for somebody that age. Music students, you ever looked at a conductor's score? It's like Greek, right? It's got fractions, counting, timing, a whole different language than what we're used to speaking. If you hire a theater major, they've already been involved in leadership because they've probably directed, stage managed, etc. They know about electronics, they know about carpentry, and about working under pressure. Because I'll tell you, when you've got an audience in the house and something goes wrong, you don't just turn up the lights and say, oh, ladies and gentlemen, we're sorry, but we have a bug. No real ETA at this point, but we'll keep, no, right? You plug on and you hope the audience doesn't notice. Still not convinced? Okay. Members of the National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Society are twice as likely to participate in the arts and crafts as the general public. Twice as likely. Preeminent scientists in both countries. Not good enough? Fine. Nobel laureates, 3 times as likely. And don't give me, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Well, education's so expensive, right? We really can't afford the liberal arts because it doesn't pay back. Oh, come on, right? Even in this state, there are all kinds of options at your disposal to get a good, well-rounded, inexpensive education. Now, if you want your child to have, they got to have that old rah-rah college experience, brick and mortar, ivy-covered halls like I did, go right ahead. But you spend your $160,000, but don't tell me it's the only choice that you have, because it's not. Okay, so let's look at some close-to-home examples. This is Jeff Ton. Jeff is an executive vice president of Blue Lock here in Indy. He was the CTO of the Central Indianapolis, Indiana area in 2015, former CIO of Goodwill of Central Indiana, writer, speaker, historian, musician, and Jeff gives this awesome talk called Leadership Lessons of Lewis and Clark. If you haven't heard it, you need to hear this. It's just great. This is Loreen Elaine. She's a digital media specialist at the Carball Clay Public Library. She calls herself a STEM artist. Right? Her degree is actually in sociology, but she got interested in math, so she taught herself math. Then she got interested in physics, so she taught herself advanced math so she could understand the physics, and now she's learning physics at Fermilab up in Chicago. This is some of her work out at thinkartprint.com. This is a friend, Marcia, former colleague. She was a Senate page, an English major, MS in computer science, violinist, cellist, soloist with the Normal Tabernacle Choir, pastry chef, seamstress, and she wants me to mention that, I'm a certified chocolatier, also happens to be a cybersecurity expert. When she was an English major, she wrote this program to find hidden words within other words. And since she happened to be in the Washington, D.C. area, some people caught notice of it, and as she said, this led to some quote-unquote interesting work with the federal government. This is a friend and colleague, Jill Casey, VP of Marketing and Business Development at Electronic Services, BS in Marketing, graphic designer, CRM expert. In 2016, she was named to the Tech 25. Now, I got to know Jill when she was a temp doing some systems admin work with us at a previous job. And I had this slide that I thought was okay. This is our deck. And I said, look at this. I think it's nice, Jill, right? And she's like, give me that, right? And this is what Jill comes up with. So this is impactful. When you're talking to an audience and this is your product, design matters, even in a technical environment. Carl Zemlin, a good friend of ours, mechanical engineer, photographer, audio engineer, business owner. This is some of his photography work that you could find at zemlinphoto.com. He's also an IMS photographer on the staff there. My message to you is, one, you're leaving talent on the table because you're not looking everywhere, right? Not everyone in the world needs a tech degree. Change your recruiting tactics. Oh, there's a war for talent. Okay, well, mosey on down the hall to the music department, right, and see who may be hanging out down there looking for something to do. You might have to do a little training because nobody pops out of the box ready to code. And let's stop training children for redundant jobs. Look, I know everybody in this room is an amazing coder, but something amazing coders all know is that out there, there's also a lot of coders that, let's face it, suck. Not everybody needs to be doing code, right? We don't need a nation full of technocrats, right? Uncle Joe was not big on the arts. We need people like this, Jeff Todd and Brian May, and Marcia and Ada, and Ben Franklin and Carl Zemlin, and Jill Casey and Jane Fawcett, and Lorena and Mae Jimmonson. Because after all, as that great violinist Albert Einstein said, the greatest scientists in the world are artists as well. Thank you. Thank you.